Ted Bundy, by all accounts, was charming, intelligent, and headed for a life of success. The people around him had no idea, no clue, what kind of monster he really was. Ted Bundy was born November 24, 1946, to Eleanor Louise Cowell. Everyone just called her Louise. She wasn't married, but claimed that the father was an Air Force vet by the name of Lloyd Marshall. Later, she would say it was Jack Worthington, a sailor. However, investigators found no record of a Jack Worthington in the Navy. Although family members had their own suspicions. You see, for the first few years of Ted's life, he lived with his grandparents, Samuel and Eleanor. At that time, having a child out of wedlock was considered an embarrassment. All the way up until he was 23 years old when he found his birth certificate, he believed his grandparents were his parents, and his mother was his sister. Some family members believe that Samuel was Ted's father. This was just a rumor, as no actual evidence could support this claim. Obviously, Bundy harbored a lot of resentment towards his mother, which may be why all of his victims were women. In 1967, while attending the University of Washington, Bundy met Stephanie Brooks. This name being a pseudonym used in many of Ted Bundy's biographies. Her real name is Diana Edwards. Things between them seemed to be going well, but in 1968, Bundy dropped out of college. He worked a few minimum wage jobs and started to volunteer for Nelson Rockefeller's presidential campaign. Diana, in frustration of Bundy's immaturity and his lack of ambition, left him and moved back with her family in California. Bundy moved back to Washington in 1969, where he met Elizabeth Klepfer. Then he went back to Washington University, where he majored in psychology and eventually became an honor student. In 1973, he went to the University of Utah to study law. Around this time, during a trip to California, a relationship with Diana started, again. She was amazed at how he changed. He continued seeing Elizabeth, and neither woman knew the other one existed. It got to a point where Ted and Diana were discussing marriage when suddenly Bundy stopped communicating with her altogether. Phone calls would go unanswered, letters returned, and then by luck, one day Bundy answered the phone. Obviously, Diana was confused as to why Ted would end their relationship like this, and when she asked him just that, his reply was, "Diana, I have no idea what you mean," and he hung up. It's believed that he planned to do this from the start. Payback for when she left him back in 1968. The exact date of when he started killing is not entirely known. Bundy admits to an attempted kidnapping in 1969, but states that he never killed anyone till 1971. Yet in another interview with a psychologist, he confessed to a double murder that happened in Atlantic City around 1969. Many investigators believe he started killing much earlier than that. They believe that when Bundy was just 14 years old, he murdered 8-year-old Anne Marie Burr in 1961. He has denied that accusation, and there is no substantial evidence to prove otherwise. The homicides that were officially accredited to Ted Bundy started in 1974. For the first half of 1974, female college students started disappearing at an alarming rate, about one every month. Linda Ann Healy, Donna Gail Manson, Susan Elaine Rancourt, Roberta Kathleen Parks, Brenda Carol Ball, and Jorgen Hawkins. There were 2 female witnesses that told the police a man wearing a sling on his arm asked them for help to carry his books to his car, a VW Beetle. On the night of the disappearance of Jorgen Hawkins, witnesses told the police they saw a man in the alley with a leg cast. A woman states that he asked her to help him carry his briefcase to his car. a VW Beetle. What Bundy would do is lure women to his car and then knock them out and handcuff them. He removed the passenger side seat to stow his victims more easily. In August of 1974, Bundy left Elizabeth Klepfer, as he was accepted to the University of Utah Law School. Not long after, Elizabeth Klepfer read about the missing women. She called the police and told them of her suspicions. In the meantime, Bundy continued with his killing spree. August 16, 1975, Officer Robert Hayward saw Bundy driving a VW Beetle in a residential area very early in the morning. The officer pulled Bundy over and noticed that the front passenger seat of his car was lying on the back seats. He also found a ski mask, a crowbar, handcuffs, trash bags, a coil of rope, an ice pick, and several other items that looked like tools you would use to break in a house. Officer Hayward arrested Bundy as he fit the description of someone who attempted to kidnap Carol DeRonch back in November. Without enough evidence, he was eventually released. But as it turns out, Bundy was already a prime suspect for the murders. But the police needed something more before they could arrest him. They soon found what they needed. Bundy sold his car in September, but the police found it and the FBI discovered hairs from Karen Campbell, Melissa Smith, and Carol DeRonch, 3 women who have never known or met each other. When Bundy was put in a lineup, DeRonch spotted him immediately. He was found guilty of attempted kidnapping and was sentenced up to 15 years in prison. Roughly a month later, he was charged with Karen Campbell's murder. Bundy handled his own defense, and while in the law library preparing for his trial, he escaped. He jumped from the second-story window. He didn't get far and was captured 6 days later. But on December 30th, 1977, Bundy escaped a second time. Piling books on his bed to make it seem like he was sleeping, he climbed through a hole in the ceiling of his cell. It wasn't known that Bundy had escaped for another 17 hours. And you would think that Bundy would lay low for a while and not try to draw any attention to himself. He did none of that. January 15, 1978, Bundy breaks into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University and beats 21-year-old Margaret Bowman with a piece of firewood. He then strangles her with nylon stockings. In another room, Bundy attacks 20-year-old Lisa Levy and beats her unconscious. After strangling her, he bites her left buttock. Bundy's rage continues as he enters the next bedroom and broke the jaws of both Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler. Then Bundy broke into the apartment of Cheryl Thomas, roughly 8 blocks away, and dislocated her shoulder and fractured her jaw and skull in 5 places. On February 9th, 1978, in a stolen van, Bundy made his way to Lake City Junior High to be more specific. Here he would find his final victim, 12-year-old Kimberly Diane Leach. She was found 7 weeks later in a shed roughly 35 miles away. Bundy felt that the police were closing in on him, so he stole a car and fled. He was stopped near Alabama by a police officer as the vehicle Bundy was driving was reported stolen. He tried to run away, but the officer overpowered him and Bundy was back in custody. Bundy was now on trial for the Chi Omega murders, and like before, handled most of his own defense. He was easily angered and let slip his true nature a few times.
Please, you understand? Just let it go.
He was offered a plea bargain by the prosecutors, but he rejected it.
My chance to talk to the press.
Contrary to Section 78204 Florida statute.
I'll plead not guilty right now.
And your grand jury...
During the trial, one of the sorority sisters, Nita Neary, witnessed Bundy leaving the house. And the bite marks that were found on Lisa Levy matched plaster molds of Bundy's teeth. Bundy was sentenced to death.
This court, independent of, but in agreement with, The advisory sentence rendered by the jury does hereby impose the death penalty upon the defendant Theodore Robert Bundy.
In a separate trial, he was also found guilty for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. While waiting for sentencing on the Leach case, Bundy got married to Carol Ann Boone. It seems there was a law in Florida that if you were in the presence of a judge while in court, you could just ask someone to marry you, and if they accepted, then it was considered a legal marriage.
Carol, do you want to marry me?
Yes.
And I want to marry you.
Yes.
And I do want to marry you.
He said you.
Now, I'll be honest, considering the charges against him at the time, Bundy was given way too many freedoms. Plus, he already escaped twice. He was given leniency that he should never have had. Nevertheless, they were now married. On February 10th, 1980, Bundy was sentenced to death a third time by electrocution. Sometime after that, Boone is pregnant. She named Ted as the father, which was odd as conjugal visits were not allowed. It is believed that Bundy may have bribed a guard. And not long after that, Bundy is now the father of a little girl. How twisted is that? Knowing full well that the electric chair was in his future, he tried to extend the time he had left as much as possible. The FBI knew there were more victims, and they interviewed Bundy many times to get that information. He stretched it out by giving them the wrong directions or acting like he didn't remember. Many times, he would hint that his victim count was a lot higher than they believed. On one occasion, the FBI suggested that they believed his murder count was 36. To which Bundy replied, "Add one digit to that, and you'll have it." All of his appeals fell through, and the FBI was fed up with Bundy toying with them. So they just left him to his fate. He had several interviews, and when asked about his victims, he would often decline to answer, or make cryptic comments like, "For every murder published, there could be one that was not." During his final interview the night before his execution, the lights suddenly dimmed. That was because they were testing out the electric chair. In the end, he claimed responsibility for 30 murders, but many believe it's more likely well over 100. On January 24th, 1989, Bundy was dragged to the electric chair, kicking and screaming. Outside of the prison, there was a crowd of people. When the hearse drove by carrying the body of Ted Bundy, the crowd erupted in cheers.
Right here.
I, for one, am glad he is gone. He was evil in its purest form. You would never have suspected that he was a serial killer, and that's what made Bundy even more terrifying. How normal he looked. Nothing about him says psychopath. He was intelligent, good-looking, and had a trusting smile. It's because of him that people develop trust issues. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, then please don't forget to hit that like button and then subscribe. Once again, my name is Rick, and I'll see you next time on Dissecting Murder.